mine to the store, then you get it. But in production,
Hmm.
then when we try to get that one.
I think it would need to be posted some.
So. Our next was who I did message there. They know we've got a 5-minute. Buffer, but okay. I'm not. You know, the owl is very simple to use and yet, I'm not sure I'm gonna get it for a speaker.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Gary.
Yes. Oh, I'm not getting audio.
Yeah, Carrie, we're not able to hear you, but are you able to hear us?
Yeah. By switching to visual, so.
Hi, Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Brian. Okay, great.
Audio. It's gonna be on screen. You don't make me ask.
I'm definitely, sorry, guys, just connected to the owl. Yeah, let me just want to get the speaker to work. Our folks are having donuts, so. Nearby device. It hoo-hooed when we started.
Is it concluded?
All right. I think the owl is failing me.
I mean.
So I am going to call an audible. And I'm gonna ask if we can, so our next speakers are here. So if we can move along. Thank you, Tara and Sai. Thank you very much. And let's see, I am happy. Okay. Can the folks on the Zoom hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. And we can hear, you can hear all right? Excellent. So the owl's not working, but the the monitor speaker is working. So, okay. Great. Thank you. So I am happy to introduce, and you're not gonna get to see the faces, I guess. Well, here, I'll turn. So,
Do you want to just, Carrie, would you like to drop the background, can you make the background non-blurry, like transparent on Zoom, no filter?
Yeah. Yep.
That way, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna turn like this so that you can see our folks, well, sort, so.
Yeah, that
um,
works.
Okay, and we have reps here from the town of Medfield, Brenda Healy and Kathy Thompson. Kathy's on the Board of Health. I have Ed Cosgrove, Board of Health in Needham, Kate Peterson, Board of Health in Dover, and Daryl Beardsley, Board of Health in Sherburne, and you know Tim. And I am, and these are the folks from BME Strategies. Brian Eustace, and I'll let Brian introduce his team, but BME Strategies are the vendor who was selected to do the fee cost analysis that we talked about. And we talked, Daryl, a little bit about your concerns, and I know Brian will be able to be responsive to that. So we just wanted to have them come on briefly, talk about what they're gonna do, and give you all the opportunity to ask any questions if you had any. And I'm gonna turn it over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carrie. And it's great to see some familiar faces and then others. It's great to meet for the first time. And yeah, to introduce myself, my name is Brian Murphy Eustace, and I support as our executive director of BME Strategies. And we've worked with communities in the region and Needham in particular for over 20 years, doing sort of public health programming and projects of various natures to sort of strengthen public health throughout the Commonwealth. And it's a sort of a privilege to get to continue this work. So we really appreciate that. And we like doing lots of different types of assessments and analysis. And so we try to pride ourselves on our flexibility. And so definitely want to hear what you want to come out of this most so that we can account for that and make sure that that happens. But with that brief intro, I'll turn it over to Karen and then Rebecca to introduce yourselves. Karen.
Hi everyone, my name is Karen Constor and I am an associate principal consultant for BME Strategies. I've been with the firm for about 5 years and I've been working in public health for over 12. With full transparency, I'm going to be more of the background person. You'll be communicating more with Brian throughout this process, but I work very closely with Brian and Rebecca. So if you see my name on emails, that's who I am, but you might not be receiving consistent communications from me. We're looking forward to working with you and learning more about all the great things that this group will be accomplishing.
Morning, everyone. My name is Rebecca Hahn. I'm a public health consultant with BME Strategies and formerly worked at DPH before I started at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health before I started at BME Strategies this past October. And I'll be supporting the project, supporting the data collection and the analysis. And I look forward to working with you all.
Awesome. I could share a few slides to kick us off just in the discussion, but it's meant to be discussion. My only question is, if I share slides, will you be able to see it from where you are? I can try, and if not, we can just have it be a conversation. These were just more to guide the conversation, so they're not critical to necessarily. But I would need, oh, thank you. You're so on top of it, Carrie. Okay, let's see. Let me know if folks can see if I were to do the full kind of present mode. Yeah, okay, let's go with it then. Great, so, and let me do it where I can actually see your faces over on, let's do play from start, and I wanna get to actually see you all. So I'm gonna try to move, swap displays, that's the one, okay.
We have speakers on our.
Sorry, so I should not press swap display. Let's see. Sorry about this.
Okay. We've been using Zoom all these years and still we get all of us get tripped up by the how do we share, which display can we see?
I know, and the two monitor thing is what the two monitor thing is what always switches me out. So let me
I know you're a very smart person. Not about
only occasionally.
No. It makes me feel a little better when someone like you has trouble, because I have trouble frequently. So.
I'm going to just do this now where I share it, and I know the slides well enough that even if I can't see my notes, we're just gonna go with it. So let's see that. Okay. And you know what? we might just not even present. We might go with this. So what I was hoping to do to kick us off is, and I'm going to let my dog in because she will bark at me the whole presentation unless I let her in the door. Okay, so thanks everybody. To kick us off, I thought we could just first align on our understanding of the intent and purpose of the project, which I think was well outlined in the scope of work. But just to kind of recap, there's really two core purposes I think we're expecting to really tackle. One is the to understand whether the cost to facilitate a particular service reflect the hard and soft costs necessary, the cost that we charge of a particular service in each of the communities for all of those types of services or fees that you would like to be evaluated, reflect the hard and soft costs necessary to actually provide that service as required, right? And I think that's like a real driver of this purpose. But then there's some effort we expect that is desired around market benchmarking to see whether the cost that you're charging in your community is in line with those costs of a similar service in communities that we identified that we think are somewhat similar or comparable to yours, and that'll look different for each of your communities. And the purpose of that, of course, is one, to just understand, are you charging market rate, even if you are charging your cost, is the cost that it takes you to deliver a service much higher or lower? And of course, from that, you can find some bright spots or spots of concern where maybe you are charging exactly what it costs and you've kind of nailed the fee exactly for what it costs you to deliver, but that's twice what a similar community does. And you get to investigate, well, why is that? What's happening in the way you deliver that service that is much more expensive than in another community of similar size and demographics or whatever it may be. And out of that would come sort of a fee cost analysis and structure for conducting future analysis. One of the ways we like to work at BME, of course, is can we develop and build not just the outcome results to share, but also the structure in which, if this was ever to be replicated, it'd be that much easier for yourselves to do it, for us to do it, for someone else to do it, just so it just makes it that much easier if this is something that you think you'll do reoccurring or that'll be valuable in the future to redo. And then we'd obviously document the process and make sure to share that as well as a final report and recommendations that speaks not just obviously to the cost versus the fee, also the comparison, the relative cost of your fees to other communities, and then perhaps what some insights are gleaned from that, sort of based on what I just described. Before I move on, I'm going to pause there. That was probably a lot just to throw out there. Is there this is obviously the most critical slide in the sense of, is there something missing from that, in that there is other core outcomes or deliverables not mentioned that you'd really like to see as part of this process? And I'm actually going to stop share so I can also see you during this part.
Anything?
Not an outcome, it's the complexity of identifying that. I mean, we have timesheets where you could look back and see how much time was spent with particular applicants, but it varies so much from place to place and the circumstances. And so going through the effort of digging out that data and trying to be precise will not be accurate in all cases. So to me, and what we've had issues with in the past in changing fees in our town, we know that our employees are spending more time carrying out these services than are compensated for by the fees. But we get pushback from the select board about having fees that are out of line with neighboring communities, because then they hear about that. And so in a way, all we really wanted is benchmarking, because I think it'd be very hard unless you had sliding fees, which we've tried a little bit with problem facilities, to at least have a re-inspection fee that we apply more often than we have in the past. We used to just try to get to compliance and skip on that. So that's what I see as a complexity, even with the timesheets that in recent years have gotten more detailed, to try to figure out exactly how many hours it takes to do a food permit, different for every applicant.
Yeah.
And sizable range across applicants.
Yeah. There's about four really important things you just said, so I want to tackle each of them because they're all really great points. One is that I'll just say out there, if all that is really desired is more that benchmarking, that would be obviously a phenomenally easier process. So certainly willing to just go down that route if everybody's in agreement in that respect. And I totally agree with you on the complexity of trying to account for services that look uniquely different in terms of the cost to deliver, depending on which institution you're inspecting or whatever it may be. There is opportunity, I think, in this process with a longer timeline where we could do some amount of like time study where we sort of track people going out doing those fees over several instances. We'll have to see what amount would be required to kind of be statistically significant to think that we could get a somewhat average across that kind of variance that you're describing. And I certainly think as part of what you're flagging, which is a really great idea that we didn't necessarily account for or kind of describe, is when we're doing that sort of research to figure out the relative fee, it would be neat to see if any other communities are trying to account for that time variance that you're describing in unique ways, other than sliding fees or something. Perhaps there is something out there. So I want to just note that that's an interesting point I hadn't thought of that I think we'll want to pay attention to as we're looking to. Maybe a question we'll ask all the other communities as part of what are your fees is also like, how have you tried to account for huge variances in the cost to deliver this service or that service in your fees structure, to try to bring back if there is any unique or best practices happening out there. But you're right that the biggest driver of almost most of your fees, I suspect, is the labor cost to do the service, and that does vary by talent and training. It varies by the institution they're working with, they're delivering the service to. There's so many factors, and so we'll certainly document those factors so different estimates could be made. But that's one that, other than a sort of time study with enough data to then be able to say like this is on average what it takes, it would be really hard to get what you're describing. You're right.
Ryan, one of the things that sorry, I'm behind the screen so you can see my
Yeah,
colleague.
no worries. I knew it was you.
Yeah, you know my voice. Oh, right. There we go. So one of the things that, we've talked about it in a couple different ways, and one of the things that we talked about was, would it make sense to get information about from one community of how long does it take them,
Yeah.
and then use that as a not a proxy, but share that information with the other communities and ask them if that seems fairly in line with them or not.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
the other
Carrie.
thing I want to mention, Brian, I just want to add this in, is my understanding is that fees are supposed to be reflective of the work that is put in. It's not just whether they're it's not just about the compensation, but it's about the charging of fees, and that there is an expectation and requirement that they represent the effort that goes into them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and Tim, I think shared that sort of clearly as well, as that is a sort of requirement. But so certainly, even though it's the easier route, suggesting that we still do both. But I would say Carrie made a great point in sort of a lead up conversation to thinking through this presentation, and that we pride ourselves often in, when we start projects like this, of kind of meeting communities where they're at, and to the extent that they're able, so I don't like to assume that everybody's in the same place and can kind of carry the same lift in the way that we want to do that. But I'd like to offer that from an inclusive perspective, like you wanted to do that. So if we were to do a time study of say, different staff to implement different services, obviously we'd like to do that in a community that we think is maybe best reflective of as many communities as possible in your coalition, and do that in one community or two, if there's another that says, yeah, I will totally sign up my entire team to carry this time tracker around for the next month or whatever it may be. I think we could do more if like desired or wanted, but certainly the easiest way is to really focus on one community and try to gather the most data we can from that community and kind of give that and ask others to sort of validate if it sort of speaks to their realities or no, inspector has never spent that much time on a tobacco inspect, whatever it may be. So I think that is a great idea, Carrie, if folks want to do that. That way, if a community just doesn't have the time to participate in that level of investigation we might do, that they could still get all of the outcome without necessarily the heavy lift.
Yeah.
Tim has a question.
So
Or thought.
a comment about that first, and then something else that going back to something Gerald said. I think there is a value in seeing what the spectrum of people in one particular position are bringing to the work, and because it would be nice to understand where the mean is, but I also think the range is helpful. I mean, we're small, we don't have large numbers, but what does it take for somebody who just got their soil evaluator license to do an inspection, and what does it take a more seasoned person to do the same work? Because I think it's useful information in terms of planning. I want to go back to what Daryl was talking about, I think Dover has an interest in knowing what other communities are doing about projects that are particularly challenging in terms of time. It's I think we have a very skewed distribution of work effort involved in these projects, and most are typical, and occasionally they are really bizarre and requiring a lot of effort. Sherburne has the most extreme example of that imaginable, but we have them too, and actually it's coming up with our Conservation Commission and our Planning Board as well, that they are beginning to think about modifying their fee schedules to allow for some of these really difficult projects. One of the issues for Dover is that as time goes on, the amount of easily buildable land is growing very short, so it becomes more complicated to assess adequacy of septic and well options. So it's a moving target to also.
Yep. Yeah, the complexity really changes.
Yes, it does.
As you are building
As we
up.
have less
And the
land. Contentious.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
these are really important points. Like, it's my experience definitely has shown that to be true, that the cost to deliver something can depend on so many different variables and factors, and while there are some that are dominant in the driving of that, you're picking up these like subtle differences that are critical, like time, political climate, right, can like change an entire amount of time it takes to do something. So I just want to be careful to say a couple of things about what you shared. One, the goal of this will be a snapshot in time. Like, this is what we think it takes for you to do like today, that service, and kind of be careful to kind of in our reporting of sharing this back, we'll be sure to make that very clear so people don't see this as different than that. However, the goal would be to provide sort of the tools and resources so that it could be easier to do this in the future if the desire was to update that, knowing that the environment might have changed or something, that the soil in the community has changed, or we know that there's so many variables that could occur. The thing I definitely echo and agree that for individuals, there would be something really cool to see kind of from amongst individual staff and kind of different communities, what that might look like from a time perspective. I want to be careful that other than aggregating the data, if you do have it be non-anonymous and you do have it be separate, you run the risk of looking a little bit like you're evaluating performance, which can get a little dicey in these kind of analyses. And I just want to put that out there that would be a concern, despite the fact that you're right, like knowing which town it takes longer and which inspector might take longer, like, can be helpful for quality improvement in your department. There's a there's a sensitivity there, if you will.
Right, so and I think that what, I think then to Kate's point about the range, I think that makes it helpful. And I know, Brian, we
yeah.
talked about trying to include, to capture in the report some information about what the variables might be that would impact price, and that would
Yep.
be both in terms of the complexity of the inspection, but also maybe in terms of some economic drivers. And we're not asking you to be a fancy economist, but you know, thinking about wage pressure and you know, some general things like that. I think those kinds of things would be helpful for the boards all as they're talking with their communities about what prices are and why. And I think it just it broadens the perspective a little bit. So you know, again, not asking for fancy economic analysis, but just kind of acknowledging the other factors that can impact.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, no, we want to make sure to account for all of the different cost drivers and labor costs based off of local cost of living. If you have a requirement to live in the community versus or in the region or however far people are commuting, like all of that plays in. And so we definitely can be sure to outline like all of the variables that we think are contributing to the cost to deliver each service. And even if we miss some, you'll be able to see that and recognize it and add in.
Yeah.
And I'd say I don't even anticipate capturing in a fee all the costs. We just wanted to get a little better than it is now.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it would be too hard to pick a fee. Or how do we easily set up some markers to say, oh, if you're gonna do this, now you have to pay again. That sort of time.
I mean,
Spreading out over multiple days, not a 4-hour chunk of the day, but multiple days. So at what point do you start adding on to things?
I actually really appreciate that perspective. I mean, that would be my recommendation as well, is that like what you would see back a little bit is like for this type of service, it takes somewhere in the range of like, say it takes somewhere in the range of $80 to $120 to deliver. You're currently charging $40 for this service. And the major drivers we saw in your community that are driving the 80 to 120 is this, and this. And so you get to decide how you either reduce expense or you up fee if you can politically do that. Like I realize there's multiple levers, and for different communities, you're going to want to choose one lever versus the other. You might not have a reality of like we have a strong mandate to not increase fees, even if it costs us 3 times what it costs to deliver. Like that's not what we're going to do. So our report, when we say we'll give recommendations, it will certainly not be you should increase your fees. Like we don't know that environment, nor could we say that with any level of confidence, but we will say like you are charging on average, 60% of what it would take or in this range. And that's largely due to this and this fact. And then it's kind of upon you and other communities are charging this. And the reason why they're able to charge this is kind of these drivers. And that kind of gives you the information to decide what you want to do.
Right.
There's nothing that said the community can't undercharge.
Right.
For
Right.
fee.
Oh, yeah.
If it costs you $20 to do something and you're charging $500, the vendor in theory has a basis for legal action to say, this number is supposed to be based on the cost. License and inspect me, and you're just making it really high because you don't like.
But my research hypothesis is that you all are frankly probably undercharging for most of your service, but that's a good thing, I think. So
Right. But and Brian, we talked about how, as you say, I mean, this is a point in time, and then it becomes a tool for consideration, awareness, discussion, and who knows where future work goes with it or does not. And as Brian said, there may not be fee changes, but to be able to have a sense of what that range is, what commensurate. That's right. Commensurate communities are doing, all of that, I think, is a useful tool for each community, and then for, you know, the coalition, kind of, are we in line? Why? And I think that it starts to inform questions of, all right, well, if we only do 2 of these a year, does it make sense to, you know, talk about this as a shared service? So this is another piece of the information that goes into that consideration, but, yeah, so, you know, I think there's immediate value because you do get the benchmarking, and then there's long-term value depending upon how each community chooses to proceed, is my
Right.
thought, so.
And I'd also
I would-
love to know if there are other approaches, maybe even outside of the 4 communities.
Yeah.
This shared services about other strategies for tiered fees. How do you do that? You know, what are the examples that if we implemented as a tiny town, we could at least say, you know,
Yeah. Oh, do we lose the audio? Oh, it froze. Bummer.
other towns do this.
Can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, it
Nice.
cut out for a
Okay.
quick second, but I think I caught what you were sharing, which I agree, which is something I'm really glad you raised, because I don't think we were going into it with that perspective. Like, I think as part of the research to try to identify how other communities outside of this coalition are approaching tiered or sliding fees, or even just have instituted other novel fee structures, is a really cool idea. And certainly we can
Yeah.
make an effort to gather that data for sure.
Yeah, if, you know, if it's readily, you know, if it's available by asking a question, I think that would be a great thing to add in. We can kind of talk about what the questions will look like. So the way this is going to go is that I'll be Brian, well, I'll be Rebecca's and Brian. I'll be the team's primary point of contact. I'll manage the contact for you all. We'll meet and kind of, I get it, I'll have a chance to look at the questions that they're proposing to gather info using. I'll have that first screen, I'll share them with you all, just for kind of a yay or nay. And then they will plan to come back at the June meeting with a, what will be sort of a strong draft, I think is what we called it, right? It'll be a strong draft of what the results, what the findings are. It won't include all of the analysis. That does take a fair amount of time, and BME has graciously agreed to kind of do a little bit of work beyond their contractual period, because our the contract does end June 30 and we're not paying. So, you know, we're fortunate that we get to work with them in that way. And so they would then come back probably in August or maybe September, depending on when we meet, to share those final results. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. Anything else that you all asked? Brian, I know you had other slides. Did we?
You just covered them really in such a quick way, so I really appreciate that.
Okay.
It really, the other 4 slides were timeline, which I'm happy to share over, but it's exactly what Carrie described. And so provided that works for everybody, it sort of shares at which stage we would provide which materials. Like, as Carrie mentioned before, June 30th, you kind of get the fees of all of the communities we research, but the full reporting would kind of carry on in subsequent months. The only major question I really have for everybody before kicking this off, because I think Carrie also outlined, like, she'll be our point of contact and we'll kind of dive deep with her, and she'll elevate the conversation to everybody if at different stages, if people want, if there's a moment where we need, you know, broader guidance or feedback. But the key thing I wanted to know is, every community, of course, we're committing to sharing back the analysis from all of the different communities that we research external to the environment, as well as all those communities in the coalition that participate and want to gather and share their fees for sharing that. But is there any community in the coalition that would say, I want all that data and information, but I really don't have the time in my department to sit through the analysis for my department? Because I just want to be clear, like, the process of actually gathering the data from you is impossible without like somewhat of a lift from you all of like, what do you charge for everything? We need your entire fee sheet. Are there any updates? Is there anything that's different? Like, can we speak with your staff that conduct these fees and find out how, like, without that kind of information. And so I just want to acknowledge that might not be for everybody, and you'd still get everything, but is there anyone who doesn't want to participate to that degree?
I'd say handing you the fee sheet is easy. Maybe pulling timesheets. Depending on how long it was talking to staff, because this is the really busy season for us, so. To stay within this fiscal year, that'd be a little bit of a challenge, and we're getting a new administrator, so we don't have an administrator right now. And we're getting a new one who we're gonna be training up, so it's just a hard confluence of things.
Totally get it. Totally
We
get
do
it.
the best we could, and I think though, both our food inspector and septic well in the field person are both so experienced that they could probably just share with you,
So
off
you-
the top of their head, really, about their
Yeah.
experiences and what they're seeing.
Okay.
'Cause
And that
their timesheets would be painful.
yeah,
If
I think that'd be a hard.
Somebody, it'd be painful for somebody.
Yeah, I'm not sure we could tease it out necessarily, the nuance we need through the timesheet itself, but what I could say is we could leave your community till towards the end, and certainly we'd gather the timesheet early to have that as part of the whole process, and then we can just check back with you and say, all right, this is based on our methodology of how we're going about this. This is what's required to really get the full data from you, and do you want to do a piece of it, or like just say like I'm okay for that piece, or you want us to do it, and we'll give that option, but kind of say we'll pay attention to having your community kind of go last, if you will.
And Brenda just raised a question of whether there was maybe an intern that could support it, but I don't know if that I think that would be, because it really requires somebody who knows.
Yeah.
So, but it's a
Yeah.
great question, because interns can be, but okay, so I
Yeah.
made note kind of what are the easy, medium, and
For each of
hard.
essentially what we're saying is for each of the individual fees, we're gonna have to speak to the person who conducts that service and do a thorough interview with them, essentially. So that's the only way to do it.
And that looks like, and so I'm seeing head now.
Yeah.
People are amenable to that, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I will work through with the communities if there's any, questions. I'm the pivot point, I guess we'll call it. So I'll, I'll work with you on it, but okay.
Awesome.
All right, Medfield set, Dover set.
Do we need to make anyone aware that they will be being contacted?
Yeah, so I'll send out a note that, so reflects, this is the conversation, this is what we are gonna cover. So once I get some of the info, more detailed info from BME on kind of these are the kinds of questions we're looking for, then I can send that out as, official communication to you all on behalf of us all. And and nobody would be contacted before there had been some kind of hey, we're gonna talk, who do you want us to talk to, that.
Okay.
And since Tim isn't here, is this the same kind of an issue for Needham?
Yeah,
Yes, they're covered. Needham was the one we described potentially looking at from the time study perspective, and kind of sharing that, and then seeing if anybody else would kind of want that process a bit, but open to other communities if they're interested in that. But certainly Needham's fees and the interviews would be conducted as it would for any other community that wants that.
it's absolutely
I would say you're gonna have the most number of cases
right.
for certain categories.
Yes,
We, on the other hand, will sell Dover and Sherborne on septic as
yes,
well.
you sure will. You will be a great case study for somebody for how it works in the small towns with that heavy demand for that knowledge. So, so I mean,
Can
there's some similarities and differences. Go ahead, Brian.
I just one question that actually could accelerate us getting started, because doing the external research and developing that is on our end already. And we have been poking around your websites, but do communities have updated kind of fee schedules or fee sheets that have everything plus or minus a couple you want to add that we investigate in your community? And if so, to the extent that that's readily and easily available to share, like that gets us started on kind of data input and like
Yeah.
right away.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think it's a.
if folks wouldn't mind taking a look at it and saying, oh, we forgot, we just started doing microblading and tattoo parlor fees. So we're just gonna add that and send it over to you. Like that would be amazing. Dispensary fee, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of the new things that are popping up in public health, but whatever, if you could take a look and kind of validate, yes, this is our current fees, and these also include the new ones we want to look at, and shoot that over to us, like or carry to us, we would we could get started right away.
The other thing I'd add is the food inspector that we have is a full-time food inspector in Boston, so. He would also be able to, I would just do on our Sherborne's behalf, share maybe some insight into any differences he sees.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome idea.
Well,
Would love
just-
that.
So-
Boston, yeah, careful what you promise. Boston's pretty private with their data, so if he's gonna give us secretly backdoor Boston data, we'll take it. We will take it.
Absolutely. I don't know that he can divulge everything, but he still says we've had some of the worst things he's seen.
Oh, no. That is saying something.
Frankly, yes, is a little horrifying.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, so, and Brenda's just pointing out, so they're, the inspector for Medfield is a contractor. They have a contract relationship, and it's Bridget Sweet, who I.
Okay, oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, so, know them well, so,
Yeah.
so that'll be interesting, because Bridget may be able to also offer some insights in how, other clients.
Yeah, across other communities. That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. She's at
Yeah.
the top of our list to
Yes.
interview them. Yeah.
So I think we'll be able to get some really interesting information. And I know Bridget is, very supportive of the shared services, really supportive of the info sharing, and, just a great, great ally. So that's great.
Awesome.
Okay, so these folks are gonna review their fee sheets, their fee schedules. They're gonna just check and see if they're up to date. See if there's anything that isn't on there that they want to note, or anything they know is coming. And they'll send them to me, I'll get them to you. We'll be in touch for getting our next meeting on the books, kind of
Awesome.
talking what
Yep.
what the questions are. And we'll, get these initial steps rolling. And I will keep the board updated. I'll tell you in May what's happening, and then we'll see BME back in June for
Fantastic.
a report on what they've gathered, what they know. Okay?
Awesome.
So,
We're excited to work with you all. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you for the time, Brian. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna say too, so Brian actually is headquartered on the West Coast, because, and it's a little early for him, so we're very thankful.
No, no worries. Yeah, my wife started a job out here 6-7 months ago. So I have been doing the
Yes.
bi-coastal thing a little bit. But the secret is actually, when people said it, Carrie's been my boss for 19 years. So working directly with her is very familiar. So I think it's gonna work really well.
I like working with you, Brian. It's been, Brian, Brian and I have known each other a long time. He's really an excellent resource, and it's an absolute pleasure to get to work with him. So, yeah.
Well, we're
Okay.
excited. Thank you all for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Take care, Brian. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, yeah. 19 years. Yeah, when I was